Hi, everyone, and a very warm welcome back to Commerce Meets Law, a podcast we talk about various commercial topics and how they interact with the legal profession. Now, today's guest is another first for the podcast because we actually have someone currently completing their 2 year qualifying work experience, but doing it abroad. So, our guest today is Annibale D'Addario, a trainee solicitor at Yungo Law, specializing in corporate law and private client work for clients based in the UAE, France, and Italy, with Annie currently based in the Dubai office. Annie comes from Italian heritage with an experience of the UK education system, allowing him to bring a truly international perspective for his clients. Another reason why I wish to bring Annie on the podcast today is actually because of his really unique and interesting journey into the legal profession. So, Annie's career journey started with studying biomedical sciences at St George's in London with an aim of pursuing a career in medicine. During his degree, he decided to make the switch to studying law, and his reasoning is what we explore in the first part of this conversation. Following his degree, Annie then completed his GDL and his LPC at BPP Law School. Annie's journey to Yungo Law is again one of the most fascinating parts of this conversation. Although he started by seeking out opportunities in the UK, Annie effectively carved out a training contract for himself purely through the power of networking and by building strong personal and professional relationships on his leisure trips to Dubai. For all of you who are interested in working abroad, whether that's temporarily or permanently, or kind of however long you want to be out there for, I think it's really important to seek out these sorts of opportunities alongside traditional routes such as applying for vac schemes and training contracts and doing it as a secondment. I think that increasingly these opportunities are opening up, and particularly the Middle East is a growing legal market, another part of the discussion that we did have on the episode as well. So I think it's definitely one to consider. And I hope that Annie is a wonderful and brilliant example of how you can do this just through the power of being able to speak to people and showing them that you've got what it takes to be a trainee at that firm, because that's exactly what Annie has done. The rapid fire for this episode also includes some comparisons between Dubai and the UK, because as there are some things that unfortunately Dubai does have over us, such as the amazing weather and lots more. So, of course, there was a bit of discussion on that on this episode. I had to bring it up because currently it's quite dreary in the UK, and a warm holiday does seem rather nice. So, I thought that we could channel that by talking about it in the rapid fire of this episode. So I hope that all of you based in any part of the world which is quite cold and miserable right now have a nice escape in this episode. Without further ado, though, I hope you enjoy this conversation, and I'll see you right at the end.
So, hi Annabelle, and welcome to Commerce Meets Law. Super excited to have you on the podcast today. We always start with a bit of an icebreaker question, which is, in your opinion, what is your superpower?
Well, hi Shreya, thank you for inviting me to the podcast, first of all. It's very nice for me to be here. And to answer the question, I guess my superpowers, it might sound quite cheesy to say, but it would be my siblings. I come from a big family and I have two sisters and two brothers. And I guess that having many siblings and having people that count on you, it's kind of what gives me the drive to kind of try to succeed in my everyday life, because I want to make sure that in the same way that I always have somebody to count on, they can say the same about me.
Yeah, I love that. We haven't had that answer on the podcast yet. And kind of segueing from that, could you give us a bit of a flavor of what were your sort of main interests and passions sort of growing up? What were you like as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a child, I would say I was what people would call a bit of a nerd. I loved reading, and I would devour so many books, and they were all like fantasy saga. So, well, Harry Potter, The Younger Games, Percy Jackson. I think it's like one of the most popular ones because they just released a new TV show on Disney about that. Like anything that was like fantasy related, I would read it. I would read like at least one or two books a week. That was like my main passion. And if it wasn't that, it was all about science, chemistry, biology, learning about the human body, learning about medicine. Those were like my biggest passion growing up, I would say.
And that explains why you sort of decided to study biomedical sciences. So,
Yes, exactly.
when you decided to study at that point, what were you thinking in terms of career options? What did you want to do post university?
Well, the idea was that I would get into medicine, and I would become a doctor. As you know, graduating medicine is a 5 year university program, sometimes 6 years, plus years and years of qualification. So I said, let me take a step back and make me think if I really want to do this. And that's why I decided to do a biomedical science degree, which would only be 3 years, and it would give me the option to transfer into medicine on year two. And that's what I did. Obviously, I did that because there was always this little voice in the back of my head which said, maybe you should try a career in law, maybe you should try and become a lawyer. But I was kind of a shy kid, so I was always put down because of that, being like, you can't be a lawyer, you're not that confident, you don't have what it takes. And I was like, well, maybe that's true. And I love science, so I might as well just go for medicine. But by year two in my undergraduate program, I was miserable. I did not like the prospects of working in healthcare for the rest of my life. It wasn't for me at all. It's just not something that I would enjoy. So I just decided to look into something else. And that's why I ended up doing the GDL after my 3 year program.
I think that's a really interesting because I think so many people, when they think about law, they sort of think about, standing up in court and they're told that, if you're not extroverted or you're not, a debating champion, that maybe law might not be for you. So I guess reflecting back on it, at that time, what would you have wanted someone to say to you, or what sort of experience would you have liked to have had, which might have told you, actually, maybe law can be for me as well?
Yeah, probably would have been better if I've had a different example of what it means to be a lawyer, because my aunt is a lawyer back in Italy, and she has the personality of a lawyer. She's this very big personality. She always says what's up in her mind. She never lets like stand back from anybody. And what she does, it's well, in Italy there is no difference between a solicitor and a barrister. So obviously she would do the office work as well as the court work, and that's kind of what gave me a wrong perspective of what being a lawyer meant. I didn't really know about the more office side, the more negotiating side of the work, which is like what solicitor in the UK do. Uh, so probably it would have been more helpful if I had somebody who exposed me to that rather than to what is the classic barrister route, I would say.
Definitely. I think that sort of, having the knowledge and then actually seeing it in real life is so important to allow you to understand that actually there's so many parts within the legal profession. I think just like in science, people think that when you do anything related to science, that becoming a doctor is the only option, but actually there are so many routes that you can then take. And I think the more we talk about it, the more people can sort of understand and, be able to pursue the path that they want. And for you, like you mentioned, you sort of did the GDL and the LLM, and you sort of, had that first interest in commercial law. So where did that interest develop, and what did you come across to tell you that commercial law might be a particular area of interest?
Yeah, of course. So, well, I came across about what commercial law was and what it implied for me, like the kind of job that I would do. As obviously I researched more about switching my career and going into law. So that's when I learned what commercial law was. But I would say that the passion for commercial law was sparked in me while I was actually doing my undergraduate degree. And I would work in a restaurant. Basically, I worked part-time throughout my whole undergraduate degree, and I worked for different restaurants, and I did different roles as I worked in the restaurants. In the restaurant, and doing that for 3 years also allowed me to get a more senior position. And the more senior I would become working in this business, the more I became aware of all the different facets and roles and jobs and well, anything that makes a business running. I learned all about that up until the point where I realized, well, there is this whole corporate world around it. People that worked around getting the finances to open a business, doing the setup of the business itself, creating the legal personality of the business so to limit other people's liability. And I realized, wait, that's something that I'm really passionate about doing, about discovering more. And I can do that as a lawyer. And that is why ultimately I felt very confident that I could get into a GDL and find something that I would like. Because even if I would ultimately not get into the classic lawyer solicitor route, I knew that I would still get that legal knowledge that could have allowed me to work in a corporate environment or in a business environment, which aligned more with who I was as a person, well, at the time and now.
That's so interesting because I think that, for so long, whether you're a law or a non-law student and you're thinking about going into the legal profession, everyone's looking for legal work experience, but actually non-legal work experience can also be so helpful in sort of helping you understand. And like you gave that example, a lot of students do have part-time jobs, whether it's to supplement their sort of, university money or just to go on holiday or
Yeah,
whatever it is for them.
100%. And that is actually what allowed me to make myself known to a lot of other law firms and to showcase my passion for the commercial world, not the actual legal work experience, but showing that I was passionate about business and about anything corporate related rather than legal job itself.
Absolutely. And just before we sort of talk a bit about the work side of it, as a non-law student completing the GDL and sort of the LLM subsequently and then the LPC as well, how hard did you find that process from going from a very science-based, STEM-based degree to law? Was that transition an easy one, or did you feel like you had to, adapt quite quickly?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it easy. I've met a lot of people who have said, well, actually, as STEM students, there is like this concept that you don't get to do a lot of writing and that puts you at a disadvantage. And I've heard a lot of people disagreeing. But for me personally, that was the case. Maybe also because English is my second language. So when I had to learn how to write in English, I learned how to write scientific English rather than legal English. And so the switch kind of, I think, put me at a bit of a disadvantage. Uh, but everything else aside, like the writing part aside, I think that the skills that you guys as STEM students, so the analytical skills, actually put you at an even higher advantage of a lot of students which instead come from a more humanistic background, because you get to analyze in a very scientific and analytical way where your client problem is, and you can put all the different factors uh, in some sort of order, scientific mathematical order, and that kind of gives you a better approach to finding any kind of solution to client's problem, I think.
Definitely. I think that's why, in law, you've got a 50-50 split when you've got trainees most times of law and non-law students, because I think that both bring such different skills to the table and they're equally important in ultimately, solving your client's needs, particularly in a business sense where you do need that analysis and understanding of your client's business, not just the legal side. And now I want to speak a little bit about your current traineeship and sort of where you're at. So before we talk a little bit about your work in Dubai, did you consider applying to law firms in the UK, or were you always quite sure that you wanted a training contract that was located abroad?
Well, no, I actually only considered applying at UK firm at first. I had no idea that getting a law firm in another, getting a training contract, sorry, in another country was a possibility. I thought, okay, I need to qualify as an English lawyer, so I need to stay in England. And the only route for me is to apply to these different law firms in the UK. And I did that. And at some points, I think I was very lucky to get to a further stage of the interview process. I never got an offer, but I did do that. And of that, I'm quite proud of. But to me, the possibility of moving abroad never came to my mind until I realized that that was an option, and I just went for it as the opportunity presented itself.
Definitely. I think it's one that a lot of people, think about. I think a lot of people want to work in an international law firm, but don't think that that can happen outside the UK and feel like, the process has to begin in the UK before they can sort of then either do a secondment or go abroad in that sense. So
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
currently a trainee at a law firm based in Dubai. So could you tell us a little bit about the firm and sort of what the application process was like to become a trainee?
Yes, absolutely. So Yungo Law is quite a small firm. It's not a big corporate firm. We do a lot of commercial work, but it's not one of the big law giants that you would always hear of. So that is why the application process for me personally was very informal. The firm at the time did not have a big career operation in progress. It doesn't have like a system where you go, you submit your CV, cover letter, answer questions, do all of that traditional law firm application process. The way that it worked is that I went to Dubai for a short holiday, and that was during my LPC, and it was it was in that 2 year time frame where any any time that I would find a law event going on, if it was on holiday, if it was because I was going back home to Italy, or for any other reason, I would just go to this legal event. I would just network. So I did that in Dubai, and I got to know the Yungo Law team as well as like a lot of other law firm. But I guess the people that I met at Yungo Law were the one that I got more along with. I talked with them, I learned about the firm, we all got to know each other. And as I was in Dubai, and I also realized the possibility that I would love living in that country, in this country, um, I I asked them like, how would it work to come and train to the firm? And they say, well, usually we are in a very classic and traditional way, just submit a CV and a cover letter. But if you have strong intention of doing that, we did get to know you now. We do like you. We do like what you're doing with your career, and we can see that you're passionate about the law. So you can just come and work with us as you finish your LPC. And it kind of like swiped me off my feet because I was like, wait, I do have a job if I want to go for it. And I guess I got to talk about it with my family, my friends, and I realized that I should go for it. And as soon as I finished the LPC, I moved to Dubai and I started my training with the firm.
That sounds incredible. It sounds like, you sort of created an opportunity for yourself. Like you created like a
Yes.
TC, which is amazing. And for someone like we mentioned at the start, you weren't the most confident of people growing up. You were sort of a bit more introverted. How did you get that confidence to be able to sort of network and talk to so many people? What was sort of the key ingredient to allowing you to do that?
Well, I would like to say that there is some sort of magical ingredient that helped me, but the reality is that you just have to go for it. You just
Mm.
have to get out there and you have to start meeting people, talking to them, realize whether the family you're visiting is the family you want to work for, and making these people like you for who you are. Because ultimately, the reason why a law firm would hire you and the reason why I was hired is because they like me as a person, and I was talking to them with no expectation of getting a job, without trying to changing who I was or changing my passions. Just go out there, network, be yourself, learn what the firm does, and if that is what you want to do. And if it is, the opportunity will be there. Because I think when I started, it was very daunting. Like I was scared. I didn't know what to talk about at these law firms. I thought that I was supposed to act in a certain way and kind of like change who I was in order to get along with those people. But the reality is that when you do that with somebody, they will see through it, and you will make yourself non-likable because of it. And ultimately, I think also that networking is the key to getting any sort of job because of this reason. That is like, I don't think that I have like the fanciest degree from the fanciest university, and I didn't have a lot of I had almost no legal experience on my back. But because of this passion that I had in commercial work coming from my work experience during my undergraduate degree, and this passion for the law itself that I showed by going to a lot of different events. Those were the two determining factors that allow me to get a training contract and move on into my legal career.
Absolutely. I think, what you've highlighted through that is the experience that so many students have, whether they're in, so the undergrad level or beyond, of feeling like they have to, like you said, act in a certain way and be a sort of certain type of person to be likable and, to be
That's
accepted.
right.
But and unfortunately it's also not sustainable, right? We want to be in here for the long term. Hopefully, you like the firm enough to want to stay there for a while, and in order to do that, it's very exhausting trying to be someone that you're
Exactly.
not.
And I think my journey helped me realizing that, because I did that in the
Great.
first place. I got into a university course thinking that I should have done something because of what my passion was back then. And changing was scary, but at the end of the day, you need to be your true self. Otherwise, you won't end up liking your life and you won't be good at your job.
Definitely. And speaking a little bit about the firm, could you tell us about some of the areas that the firm specialize in and how many offices there are apart from Dubai for the firm currently?
Yes, of course. So the firm has currently 5 offices worldwide, but 2 are based in Italy, the south of Italy particularly. The other 2 are based here in the UAE. One is in Dubai, and the other one is the central office in Ras Al Khaimah, which is the emirate that regulates us as a legal entity working in the UAE. And then we have another small firm in France. I'm working from the one in Dubai because that is where the biggest commercial transaction happens. So that's where I'm exposed to more commercial law and more international law. And that's also where the English qualified solicitor work. And they're the only one that can give me the training that I need to qualify as a solicitor. And the firm itself is here in the UAE, was born as a commercial law firm, so mostly taking care of corporate needs and of corporate clients, especially corporation that were either in Europe and wanted to expand in the Middle East, or were in the Middle East and wanted to expand in Europe. However, recently the firm has been building up a strong private client practice, and that is because it's trying to adapt to the changing market in the UAE. Basically, I don't know if you're familiar with the market, but in the early 2000s, a lot of people would just move to the UAE, work there for a couple of years, get their tax-free salary, and then move back to Europe. Now things are changing, and there is so many people, especially British and UK citizens, that are moving permanently to the UAE and are settling there with their families and want to be there in the long term. And obviously, they're not aware about the implication of that, because the family law, inheritance law in the UAE is based on Muslim law. And clients need to be advised at the implication of those. And obviously, the firm saw an opportunity there. And that's why we're also creating this new practice. And aside from that, we also have a strong established real estate and employment law practice.
That's super interesting. And I think, especially for a lot of people now, like you said, the UAE, I think, is becoming increasingly a place that people want to move to beyond just, the amazing weather and the food available, but also from a careers perspective and a lifestyle perspective. So, for someone who's potentially, kind of their comparison base is a training contract in the UK, do you have a similar experience in terms of 4 different seats over your 2-year training contract, or do you have more flexibility on the different areas that you can sort of work on and take matters from?
Yeah, no, we do not do that. We don't do a 4 seats training contract because it's a smaller firm. So obviously, I am the only trainee at the firm, and I do not get to work on a set number of transactions. So I do tend to work on commercial matters, corporate law, real estate law, going into the private client side of it at the same time within the same week. And I guess it is very challenging because the private client side is very different from the corporate side. When you're a corporate lawyer, you're just looking at the transaction, you're trying to create a solid contract that cannot be that completely protect your client and cover for any kind of particular scenario. But you don't really get to do that with private clients, where instead you need to be a bit more empathetic to the person needs, because sometimes you'll be helping them through a divorce or an inheritance matter, so which are very sensitive and human topic. So you need to be able to draw the line between what is commercial and what is business, and what is personal everyday matters that you're helping a client with. But I'm also getting to learn a lot, and I'm learning the full profession of a lawyer without being fully specialized in only one practice area and only knowing about that, which I do like personally.
Definitely. And I think, it sounds like you said, that balance of commercial and personal is so key. But I think a lot of times, if you're in a firm with a lot of trainees and it's very, very specialized, and you're doing just a seat in something that's very, very specific, it can be hard to get that full picture of what a lawyer actually is, which is not
Yeah,
just
exactly.
assisting on the business side, but ultimately you're dealing with people. So understanding, someone's needs, I think is it's a different skill set, but I think it's important for a lawyer to be able to have both. And I guess from your perspective, as you mentioned, you're one of the only trainees at the firm, which I think can be most exciting and challenging all at the same time. So can you tell us what a day in your life kind of looks like, at least currently?
Yeah, I think that is a great question because it also kind of shows how great the life of a trainee, a Yango is. Like you said, it's very challenging because I'm the only trainee, so I'm often the key point, like the key reference points for the partners in the firm and the lawyers in the firms, and trying to connect the two with the admin staff of the firm as well. And I tend to work on every matter that the firms get to a certain extent, whether it will be just to fix some files and create a good folder, or it'll just be, here's this client, take care of him, we need you. Um, and aside from that challenging part, where the firm is always very supportive and they try not to give me too much than what I can handle, uh, the fact that I also get to do um, so much varied work is incredibly exciting. I never have a dull day or a day that is the same to the previous days. Like only last week, for example, it was an incredibly busy week. And it started with a Monday working from home, like just having some client meetings and working on some transactions. And then we had Tuesday and Wednesday attending this legal operation and tech conference, which our firm also sponsored, where I got to learn so much about legal technology and how it's changing the legal landscape, and how the profession of somebody who works in legal operation can help you develop your firm no matter the size. And that is, I think, something that is a bit overlooked in the rest of the world, in the rest of the world, aside from the US, where it's a very big practice. I had no idea about it until I learned about it this week. And then Thursday, I went into the office and we had this big transaction that we had to close. And I was traveling while at the office, I was traveling around a lot of different public offices to represent our client in this transaction, which we ended up closing successfully. And then Friday, again, work from home day. I got to work in a coffee shop. It was a bit quieter. And next week, I again have a conference, not conference, representing the firm at a legal fair for Middlesex University. And it just shows that every day I'm up to something new, because if we have a dull day where we don't have work, our firm likes sending us out there at different networking events where we can find some more business, we can get a lot of people to know our firm. And it teaches us that running a business and being a lawyer is not only sitting behind a desk and working on a document, but it has all these other things that I've discussed.
Definitely. And you have given us not just a day, but actually a week in your life, and you can really see that variance in it, which I think is what you want to do when you're a trainee, because you want to be learning as much as you can. And the more varied work you do, the more you can learn from it, and then when you get to that stage of specialization, that is a sort of the next step in that journey. From the perspective of, I guess, being in a firm in the UAE, which is a particularly, I think, growing market right now, and one that a lot of people are considering, what, from your perspective, do you think is sort of the future direction of sort of where the firm might be going in terms of where the clients might be based? So, in terms of, I guess, predictions, do you think it'll be more based in the UAE and Europe, or do you think there can be expansion into the UK and the US and sort of other areas as well?
Well, the firm itself would like to expand in the UK, especially because of the large number of British clients that we've been getting lately because of this massive migration of the UK
Mm.
to the Middle East, the UAE in particular. But I do think that anybody who is based in the Middle East market right now should be looking at Saudi Arabia, because it's investing so much money into its tourism. They have massive operation going on. I know so many people who are based here in the UAE, but basically work Monday to Friday, well, technically Sunday to Thursday in Saudi Arabia. And I think that while the firm would like to expand in the UK, it's probably more realistic that we'll move towards Saudi Arabia because it's an emerging market. It's something that a lot of people should be looking into right now. And that is where real opportunities are right now.
Yeah, I think that that's really true. And I think that having that understanding and sort of, being the leaders in that and seeing that before other people sort of get into that market is so key because obviously that's where you can develop those client relationships, which maybe haven't, sort of been formed yet. And from your perspective, where do you think you would sort of like to go next in your legal journey post this sort of your traineeship? Do you think that, sort of being abroad is the best option for you, or do you feel like coming back to the UK and training here for a couple of years would be the next best step?
Well, I am definitely coming back to the UK eventually. I was living in London and I love London, and I think the city has still a bit more to give me. But I think as I finish my training contract, I will evaluate whether I want to stay a couple more year with Yungo, which has been incredibly supportive and is teaching me so much, or try to move in a more international well, Yango is already a pretty international environment, but an even more international environment, like working for a very big law firms, like I don't know, Clifford Chance or Freshfields. Like I will look into it. Uh, but I might probably stay in the UAE for a couple more years. I know that. Then definitely go back to the UK for a few years as well. Uh, but as you can see, I'm not really set on anything right now. I'm more focused on finishing my training contract realistically. What I do know I want to do in the next at least 7 years is going back to Italy, maybe for 1 year or two, because I would like to become an Italian qualified lawyer as well. And obviously, it's a very challenging it's a very challenging process qualifying as a lawyer in any jurisdiction. So I am thinking maybe to make it happen in the 7 years after I qualify as an English solicitor, but probably it'll take a bit more than that.
Yeah, and I think that, seeing that perspective of having a vision, but also focusing on what you're doing right now, I think is so important. I think sometimes we can get caught up in, what the future might look like and forget that right now you want to enjoy where you are,
Yes, I tend
that
to do
you
that
sort of
quite
want to.
often.
Absolutely. I think it's something that, especially, I guess, as law students or even in degrees like medicine, where the journey to getting there is quite long, it's quite difficult sometimes to focus on the now because you're just thinking so much about, oh, what happens when I finish my degree? What happens when I finish training? And so on. But from your perspective, and especially seeing the amazing journey that you've had at Yongo and sort of, all the things that you've learned, what sort of person do you think should be considering experience abroad and training abroad as opposed to training in the UK? Do you feel like there's a particular person or particular qualities that a person has, in which case they should look for that?
Yeah, well, I would say that the common factor that uh, would unite people that should be looking at training abroad is obviously live a different, wanting to live in a different culture and being passionate about traveling and adapting to something different than what they grew up into. So that's why I would say that the first people that I would tend to call on this are international students, European students who went into the
Mm.
UK to become an English solicitor and that think that remaining in the UK is the only option. Obviously, it's not only them. There might be a lot of people in the UK, British citizen, which might love the idea of training somewhere else abroad. But I would say that the common factor bringing all these people together needs to be a strong passion for pursuing something that is different, wanting to live away from your home because it can be difficult. Well, it has been very difficult for me personally. Firstly, when I moved to the UK and then when I moved here to the UAE, you just don't know anybody and it takes quite some time before you get used to it and you realize that everything is going to be okay, even though you feel like you're on your own and you're a bit lost at first. So unless you have a strong passion to learn about a different culture, don't do that because you will not enjoy it in the long term.
Absolutely. I think it's one that people, don't really talk about. I think we talk about, it being difficult for not just international students, but anyone sort of moving to university and having to find new friends and build new friendships. But I think the transition from university to work also can be equally challenging sometimes, particularly if you're in a completely
It's even
new
more
country.
challenging because when you are in university, obviously you met a lot of peers who are interested in, who share the same interests, we're living the same
Yeah.
university experience, whereas with work, you don't necessarily get to meet these people. There is only a limited amount of people that you meet at work, and and their value don't necessarily aligns with yours. So that makes it a bit more difficult than moving into university, or at least that has been my experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a bit more of you have to make an active effort in order to, sort of build those social relationships in work, outside of work, to ensure that, you have that support network as well. And I guess from that, we tend to have a bit of a personal growth section on the podcast where we talk a little bit about, your sort of work-life balance and motivations. And for someone who's in Dubai, I think for when someone first thinks of Dubai, they think of beaches, they think of resorts and warm weather, especially compared to the weather we're having in the UK right now. So, what does your, I guess, work-life balance look like in terms of how much time you have on the weekends and how much time you have sort of to relax outside of work?
Well, I have to say that the firm is incredibly supportive of us having an healthy like work-life balance, and obviously the good weather also helps you with that because you feel that there is never a weekend when you have to be stuck at home because the weather is miserable. So you can always go out and be up to something new. But going back to what the firm does for us, I think it's incredibly supportive because first of all, it discourages any kind of conversation or work-related conversation between employees after hours. So that is incredibly good. And I almost never worked in the weekends. Like the time that it happened, maybe was twice that happened. And when I say working in the weekend, it meant that probably I had to respond to a call or an email for like 10, 15 minutes, but I never had a full working day in the weekend. Obviously, there is times where you end up working after hours, but it's very rare. And to support that, the firm also tends to give us a lot of flexibility where if you do end up working until 8, 9 p.m. because you're working on this transaction and it needs to be finished, you get to start later the day after. And on top of that, the firm also employs a 4.5 day working week. So we do finish a couple of hours earlier on Fridays, which it always makes you feel like you're having a long weekend. And it gives us a lot of flexibility with working from home, where we are encouraged to work from home at least 2 days a week. Obviously, if you want to go to the office every day, it's always open for you to go in whenever you like. But we're always advised try to stay home like on Fridays or like Mondays or Wednesdays so that you can also take care of your own personal thing as you go on with your working day, because sometimes there is no need for you to be stuck in front of the laptop unless we have the work.
Yeah, and I think that point about, like you mentioned, the 4.5 working day week, I think sounds great because it really kind of puts that work-life balance into practice and shows the firm's commitment to that. From your perspective, we spoke a little bit earlier about, sort of living in the now and ensuring that, you're working towards current goals. What would you say are your sort of goals for the rest of your training contract in terms of what you want to learn and how you want to grow before you qualify as a solicitor?
Yeah, definitely. I think that right now the key element that I want to learn how to master is my ability of networking and getting clients. I think that I'm good at networking, but going from there to learn how to find your own client and how to create your own business, there is a massive gap. And usually trainees are not taught about this, especially in a university environment. So I realized it about as I started working, and our firm encouraged us to just go out there and find our own clients, bring our own business to the firm, as that would ultimately reward us in the long term, in the long run. And it was a bit scary learning about this aspect because you're not taught about this in any way university. So uh, I want to focus on that, and for my personal development, find my way of getting clients, how to get the clients, how to manage them, and especially being able to balance what kind of business I want to bring to myself and work on, because that is what will ultimately allow me to succeed as a lawyer in the long term.
Definitely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there in terms of the one thing that we don't really get taught at university. You learn about the academic side, you even learn about the practical side to an extent on the LPC of how to be a lawyer, but you never really learn this idea of, especially I think increasingly now, building a brand around yourself, building, reputation and then using that to get clients. I think it's such a key thing that obviously the more qualified you are, the more you can do that. But starting as a trainee, I think, is so important to ensure you have those long-term relationships. And before we close off this section, if you had to give some advice to your 18-year-old self at the start of university, what do you think you would say to that Annie right now?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question because it's I don't know if my answer is gonna be kind of cliche, but I would definitely tell myself to sit back and try to enjoy my life a bit more. I think that me, like any other law students or anybody who's thinking about getting into law, I just put so much pressure on me of having to get certain grades and having to achieve certain goals by a certain time frame. And then if I didn't get a training contract at this point, it would almost be like I'm some sort of failure. And that's absolutely not right. And I think if there is something that has slowed me down in getting where I did get eventually, was all this pressure that I would put on myself. So I would definitely go back and tell myself to just uh, sit back, relax, and I'm working hard anyway. So one way or another, I will get where I did get.
Definitely. I think that, like you said, we do tend to put so much pressure on ourselves at that stage when you think that, I think we forget that, you're only 18, 19 years old and you've got time to figure it out. And it feels like this race to, get to that next path and not actually think about what it is you want to do and just enjoy it, while it lasts. Before you get to the world of work, which is
Yeah.
a long time for the rest of us. And we normally finish with a rapid fire, just 5 questions to get to know you in a bit of a different way and end on a slightly fun note. So this one is a little bit Dubai themed, considering sort of what part of the world you're in right now. So first up, what do you think, in your opinion, is the best thing about living in Dubai?
Well, without question, and I think you'll hear that from anybody that lives in Dubai, is the weather. It's always sunny, it's always warm, it's basically summer right now, and it just improves your mood so much. Especially me as a South European, I forgot what it meant to just living in a sunny, warm weather all this time, and I don't know if I could ever go back to a cold country.
And for those of us in the UK, to make ourselves, feel a little bit better, is there anything that you dislike about living in Dubai?
Yes. Well, particularly because I live in London, what anybody who lives in Dubai will hate, and I do personally as well, is the traffic and the driving. It's so dangerous. The people that drive here are so dangerous. You see car accident every day, everywhere. And if it's not that, it's the traffic. You can end up being stuck 1 hour into traffic. And yeah, and that is the only way to move around. Like there is no public transportation, otherwise there will be a solution, but there is no solution. So if anything, your people in the UK are lucky because of that.
And if you had to sort of compare an ideal weekend in the UK when sort of you were at uni and now in Dubai, what do you think the key differences would be in terms of what you end up doing and what it's like?
Yeah. Well, I guess that is another point in favor to the UK because, well, weekends in Dubai are always beautiful. You always go out and you go to the beach or you do some sort of glamorous activity like going to a restaurant, and it's always going to be something incredibly fancy and shiny, or some sort of very fun activity. And I guess you get to that in the UK as well, if you like, but you also do get a lot of nature and green in the UK. So I do miss spending my weekend just going for a walk in a park or going to the local pub with my friends. There is not that sense of small residential life in Dubai, which you can get in the UK and even in London, even though London is a bigger city than Dubai.
Yeah, I think that does, set London apart in that sense of, being a capital city, but I think being one that is just so green and there are sort of parks all around for sure. But I guess yeah, you've got your pros and cons on both sides. And ending on a slightly more career focused note, the next question is what is the best and worst advice that you've ever received?
Well, okay, so I think I'll start with the worst advice. So we'll just finish on a nicer note. And I think the worst advice that I did receive was from a lawyer or a tutor that not tutor, a mentor that I did find myself, who told me that I should change my name to make it more appealing to the English speaking folks. And why I ate most about that advice is that it did take me at a time where I found myself to agree with that. But you never should anything like that. You should not change your name. You should not change who you are to make yourself more likable, because you won't end up liking yourself in the long term. And turning to the best advice, I would say, is the advice that I would give myself as an 18 years old. A lot of people, family, close friends would tell me the same thing, like, uh sit back and enjoy your journey. You're doing well, you're doing better than I'm doing, so don't put all this pressure on yourself, because you will end up hating something that you should love instead. And I wish that I listened to that a bit earlier in my career.
Definitely, and I hope that anyone who's listening, if even though it's one that they might have heard before, I think it never hurts to just repeat that and remember that it's
No,
important to sit
exactly.
back
Obviously,
and
I'm saying it so that I hope anybody who's listening will listen to that as well. Just keep calm, you will get that. We will all eventually.
definitely. And final question, if you had to choose an alternative career path to law, what do you think that would be?
Hmm. Fun question. I think that if I were a bit more creative as a person, what I would like to do would be working in the movie industry. Probably as a writer, I would love to come up with a story and try to convey a message to people through a movie, through a TV show. And sometimes I've thought about it, about writing something, put it down, but I feel that I'm not a good writer yet, but potentially at some point I will come up with a very good idea. I'll be able to write it down, and maybe I will later on in life release my own movie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking forward to it, whenever you decide to embark on
Yeah,
that
I hope
journey.
it
And
happens. I'm not sure, but
On that note, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and a massive shout out to Annie for taking the time to come on the podcast and be so gracious with his time and all of his responses. As always, please do send your feedback on commercemeetslaw@gmail.com. You can also DM us on Instagram at commercemeetslaw. We also have a YouTube channel, as mentioned before, called Commerce Meets Law as well, where I'll be uploading all of the video podcasts that come on Spotify, and also some extra content for all of the CMO lovers. For now, though, take care, goodbye, and I'll see you very soon in the next one.